The member for Kent North.
So, Bill 13, an act to amend the Motor Vehicle Act?
Correct.
Yes. Donc, merci, Monsieur le Président. Hier, en comité, j'avais proposé d'amener des gens, des experts sur ce projet de loi. Ce projet de loi est très mal ficelé. Je pense que le ministre a eu de la difficulté à défendre ce projet de loi ici. It really, in my eyes, Mr. Speaker, is bad public policy. Il y avait très peu de recherches de fait sur le projet de loi. Il y avait beaucoup de questions qui ont été laissées sans réponse de certains de mes collègues aussi. Je n'étais pas le seul. C'est pas un projet de loi où il y a eu extrêmement d'informations dessus. Il n'y a eu pas de consultation. On parle ici d'un projet de loi qui a quand même des choses très importantes à côté. Oui, je comprends qu'on change les lois pour la sécurité, mais quand on va permettre un nouveau service, comme les services d'autopartage, d'Uber, Lyft, il me semble, avant de permettre ça, on devrait réfléchir sur l'effet que ça va avoir sur la société néo-brunswickoise. Et c'est connu que Uber fait de l'évasion fiscale, ne paye pas d'impôts au Nouveau-Brunswick, au Canada, paye très peu d'impôts dans les pays où ils sont implantés. Il y a plusieurs pays qui commencent à questionner le fait qu'ils ont donné le droit à Uber de pratiquer. Et le ministre n'a jamais consulté avec le département des Finances sur cette question. Puis moi, ma crainte, Monsieur le Président, c'est qu'on va laisser une entreprise venir s'installer au Nouveau-Brunswick, qui ne paye pas d'impôts au Nouveau-Brunswick, qui va faire descendre les prix, prendre la place des entreprises qui payent des impôts au Nouveau-Brunswick, qui participent activement et positivement à la société néo-brunswickoise, puis on va permettre un monopole de se créer et permettre à certains services de venir s'installer sans payer des impôts. L'autre chose, Monsieur le Président, que j'ai demandé hier, c'était par rapport aux labor standards. There hasn't been any consultation about labor standards, and the questions yesterday weren't always very clear. And so what I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, is, and I did this demand yesterday in committee, it was ruled out of order. So in the order, in the ruling, I was told that I could bring this to third reading. So this is what I'm doing. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to propose an amendment that Bill 13, an act to amend the Motor Vehicle Act, be not read a third time, and that the subject matter for the bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Law and Amendments.
The member for Kent North, excuse me, seconded by the member for Memramcook-Tantramar, moves an amendment that Bill number 13, an act to amend the Motor Vehicle Act, be not now read a third time, and that the subject matter for the bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Law Amendments. Anybody further wish to speak to it? The member for Memramcook-Tantramar in the gallery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like to speak to this amendment brought forward by the member from Kent North. I was watching committee last night, and so I did hear the exchanges. I did hear the questions asked, and there were some questions that were not able to be answered fully. I do believe there does need to be more consultation done on this matter, and There were some questions from various opposition parties that weren't able to be answered on topics around consultation, around labor issues, around what this means for the economy, and even around what this means in terms of rural areas and how this will be applied. And it didn't seem that everything had been worked out. There was kind of the sense, oh, we'll fix that later. Well, I would argue it's the duty of this House to send this to law amendments, hear more information, and to sort it out before we pass this legislation that admittedly it has not been sorted out and still has some issues in it. So I would ask members of the House to send this to law amendments so that we can do our work as legislators to make sure that this is a good law if indeed we decide to pass it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? The Minister of Justice and Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very simple act. It came to the provincial government as a result of a request by the three major cities, St. John, Fredericton, and Moncton. It is not the role of the government and public safety to decide whether or not in a free society someone should be allowed to operate a business or not. We are a democracy, and if someone wants to do business in a transportation network operation, they can. The interests of the provincial government here relate to two items only: that the person driving the vehicle be capable, competent, and have the level of training, medical testing, and things of that nature to provide safe transportation. And secondly, it is the role of the provincial government to make sure that the vehicle in which the public have the opportunity to be transferred in is safe. That is, the tires are appropriate, it's safety inspected, it's steering, it's lights, and things like that. So the role of the provincial government and the role of public safety here is to make sure that the driver is competent and that the vehicle is safe. That is the role of the provincial government. With respect to the right to operate, this is subject to the municipality or the local government. If a person wants to set up a transportation network company, be it an Uber, a Lyft, or whatever you want to call it, they apply under the bylaws or under the legal authority of the area for permission to do so. And that is the role of the municipality. It is not the role of the provincial government. It is not the role of the provincial government to respond to some unsubstantiated case about tax avoidance, about the payment of taxes, or anything else like that. If the member opposite believes that there is something improper being done, then he should notify the Canada Revenue Agency, he should notify the RCMP, he should, if he believes that there is improper conduct, then he is obligated to do something about it and file a complaint. We don't go beyond that. It is not the role of the provincial government to respond to rumor and innuendo. We respond to facts that are put forward to proper authorities and investigated. Anyone who has a transportation network company and has an employee or a contractual relationship for a car and a driver, that person and that company are subject to all laws dealing with labor relations, employment standards, and safety which are existing in the province today. There is no exclusion to the law. There is no exclusion to any of these things. So what we have here is an organization in our society that deals with the utility of personal transportation. The business model is primarily directed towards urban centers because they have enough critical mass of people to make the business viable. It doesn't mean they're not allowed to operate in a rural setting, but that is what the market decides, and that is what entrepreneurs decide. And that is not what the government decides. If you want to employ capital and buy vehicles and operate in a rural setting, well, if the phone don't ring, you don't have any revenue. And that's a business decision. That is not government's job to decide where someone should open. Costco decides where Costco goes. General Motors decides where their dealerships are. Canadian Tire decides where to have its stores. And in a free society, government doesn't get involved in those kind of decisions so long as the law is being followed. So the provincial government's role here is not to decide whether somebody should or shouldn't do this. It is to make sure that the driver of the vehicle is competent, that the vehicle is safe, and the public can have an expectation of some idea that there is some control in public safety with respect to that. Uber is essentially a matchmaking organization. It simply brings people together. And if you look at urban centers, and you look at these, we've all seen pictures of it, 5, 6-lane highways packed with cars, all emitting CO2, it's highly inefficient. People don't need to go everywhere in their own vehicle anymore. This is good. People can phone up and have somebody pick them up at their house, take them to work. They can work in their vehicle, and they can talk on their phone, and they can read particular things, and they can make good use of their time. They don't have to pay $600, $700, $800 a month for parking. We don't have one person in one vehicle traveling into big cities and polluting the air. It is a private matter in a free economy, which is throughout the G20, throughout the country, requested by the municipalities. And the role of the government is not to call witnesses and find out in what jurisdiction Uber is domiciled and pays its taxes. If it's taxable in New Brunswick, it will pay tax. If there's HST in the transaction, they will remit. If they buy a vehicle, they will pay tax on the purchase of the vehicle. If the employee is working for them, employee remittances will be taken, income tax will be paid at the federal and provincial level. So this great idea that there's some nefarious operation here, I suggest that the member produce evidence. And this House does not operate on evidence and innuendo and Twitter and everything else. This government operates on facts. And if the member opposite has facts, then I urge him to bring them forward, give them to Canada Revenue Agency, give them to the RCMP, report them to Labour Standards, and do whatever else he thinks he should do. But to deal in innuendo and speculation and allegation is irresponsible, and it is not something that this House, this government, or Her Majesty's loyal opposition or opposition members should engage themselves in. If he has a problem with the law, then he should file a complaint. But we don't deal in innuendo, and we don't deal in rumor, and we don't make our policy on Twitter or Facebook or Google or anything else like that. This is a simple matter, a very simple matter. The driver needs to be competent and the vehicle needs to be safe. That's the provincial government's job. That is public safety's job. The regulation of it is to the municipality and the local authority, and that's all this does. And if anyone has a problem with that, then don't vote for it.
The member for Kent South and Leader of his party. Sorry, the member for Fredericton South and Leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the motion here is dealing with a very specific thing, very normal thing, which is we have a problem in our committee stage of investigation of bills, and that is members don't have access to subject matter experts or stakeholders by way of invitation to appear before the committee. The chair has ruled that the committee cannot invite subject matter experts, stakeholders, anyone else to appear before the committee to help members do their job in evaluating the quality of the bill, the comprehensiveness of a bill, based on the evidence that subject matter experts or stakeholders could bring forward, Mr. Speaker, unless this House gives the Committee on Economic Policy that mandate. So the only option, Mr. Speaker, when you've got a bill that seems to be written in haste, that seems less than comprehensive, that seems problematic, that seems pretty narrowly focused in a world where there have been many regulatory issues raised globally around Uber and other services like it, and this is a new business in the New Brunswick context, Mr. Speaker. We've got to get the regulation correct, and so it's perfectly reasonable that this bill go to Law Amendments Committee so that subject matter experts, so that stakeholders can be invited to come in and speak to MLAs so MLAs can gather the evidence they need to make a wise decision on this bill in terms of whether it can go forward without amendment or whether it requires amendment to deal with issues raised by the evidence presented in committee. That's why this needs to go to the Law Amendments Committee. It's not something to be frightened by. It's not something that's out of the ordinary. It just has to do with the way our members need to do our work, Mr. Speaker, because we are constrained at committee stage in the Committee on Economic Policy from inviting witnesses, from inviting subject matter experts, from inviting stakeholders to help MLAs do their work. That's the problem. This House can fix that problem by changing this mandate. Until it's fixed, we will continue. We will continue when bills come up that seem less than effective, that don't properly address the issues they need to address to move that those bills go to Law Amendments Committees where MLAs can seek the evidence they're looking for. They can hear from stakeholders and formulate their opinion, propose amendments, make sure that those bills that come to third reading are going to be written and comprehensive enough to serve the needs of the people of this province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.